friends and acolytes, prepare to plunge into the shadowed abyss of the Star Wars galaxy. On the forsaken world of Exegol, the Sith Eternal toiled in secret, worshipping Darth Sidious as a god and seeking to resurrect the lost powers of ancient Sith lords, rituals that could shatter worlds and defy death itself. Yet, their grand vision crumbled against the resistance, leaving a question that haunts the holocrons. Why did they fail to restore the Sith's ancient might? Reach out with the Force, crush that subscribe button, and join us as we unravel this dark enigma, the shrouded genesis of Exegol's cult. The storm-racked world of Exegol, hidden in the unknown regions, pulsed with a malevolent energy that drew Darth Sidious like a moth to a flame. In the waning days of his galactic empire, he foresaw his own demise and seeded a clandestine cult, the Sith Eternal. These fanatics, cloaked in crimson robes, revered him as the culmination of the Sith's legacy, believing his resurrection would usher in an era of eternal dominion. Deep within Exegol's jagged caverns, they built a labyrinthine citadel, its obsidian walls etched with runes from Korriban's ancient tombs. Here, they hoarded fragments of Sith lore, holocrons, scrolls, and relics, salvaged from the galaxy's darkest corners. Their mission was clear: restore the esoteric powers of the ancient Sith, from essence transfer to rituals that could bend reality itself. Yet, the cult's foundation was flawed from the start. Sidious, ever the manipulator, treated the Sith Eternal as pawns, not equals. He entrusted them with only slivers of his knowledge, fearing their ambition might rival his own. The cultists, though devoted, lacked the raw force sensitivity of true Sith lords, relying instead on alchemical experiments and forbidden technologies. They studied tales of Nagasado's world-shaping sorcery and Exar Kun's spirit-binding rituals, but their understanding was incomplete. The holocrons they possessed were often damaged, their secrets locked behind cryptic riddles. Worse, the cult's isolation on Exegol bred paranoia. They saw enemies in every shadow, even among themselves. This lack of trust stifled collaboration, as each acolyte hoarded knowledge to curry Sidious's favor. The Citadel's air grew thick with betrayal, echoing the Sith's ancient flaw. Their own ambition was their undoing. As they labored to recreate powers like fold space or dark healing, their efforts yielded only pale imitations, their rituals faltering under the weight of incomplete lore. The Sith Eternal's early years were marked by small victories. They mastered crude forms of essence transfer, stitching Sidious's spirit to cloned bodies, but these vessels decayed rapidly, unable to contain his dark essence. Their attempts to summon Force phantoms produced only fleeting specters, lacking the potency of Darth Victivus's creations. The cult's alchemists crafted monstrous war beasts, but these were shadows of the Massassi warriors of old. Each failure deepened their desperation, driving them to delve deeper into Exegol's dark nexus, a wellspring of the Force that amplified their rituals but twisted their minds. By the time of Sidious's first death, the Sith Eternal had become a fractured machine, bound by fanaticism, but crippled by their master's secrecy and their own limitations. Could they ever hope to restore the Sith's ancient glory? The shadow of Darth Gravid's legacy centuries before the Sith Eternal's rise, Darth Gravid's madness cast a long shadow over their ambitions. His destruction of the Sith's great library on Jaguada obliterated countless secrets, rituals of teleportation, spirit binding, and world-rending sorcery. The Sith Eternal believed they could reclaim these lost arts, but Gravid's betrayal left gaps in the Sith's knowledge that no holocron could fully bridge. On Exegol, the cultists sifted through the wreckage of his legacy, piecing together fragments of lore like archaeologists unearthing a shattered civilization. A single holocron, said to belong to Darth Andedu, hinted at essence transfer, but its instructions were maddeningly vague, requiring a mastery of the Force the cultists lacked. The cult's scholars pored over these relics, their crimson-lit chambers filled with the hum of ancient devices. They uncovered references to rituals that could reshape planets, but the key incantations were missing, destroyed by Gravid's hand. One acolyte, a former Imperial Inquisitor named Varn, claimed to have glimpsed a vision of Korriban's Valley of the Dark Lords, where a hidden vault held untouched Sith knowledge. The cult dispatched agents to scour the galaxy, from Mustafar's lava fields to Dathomir's witch crypts, but these missions often ended in failure, their operatives hunted by Jedi or lost to the galaxy's perils. The Sith Eternals' reliance on scavenged lore meant they were always one step behind the Ancients, chasing echoes of a power they could not grasp. Their experiments grew increasingly desperate. Using Exegol's Dark Nexus, they attempted to recreate the fold space technique, hoping to teleport armies across the galaxy. The results were catastrophic. Acolytes vanished into the void or emerged as twisted husks, their bodies warped by the Force's wrath. The cult's alchemists turned to cloning and genetic manipulation, seeking to forge warriors imbued with Sith spirits, but these creations were unstable, prone to madness or rebellion. The shadow of Gravid loomed large. His destruction of the Sith's knowledge had left the cult with a puzzle missing half its pieces. Even Sidious, for all his cunning, could not fully compensate for this loss. His own mastery of essence transfer, learned from a Jedi holocron, was a bitter irony, a Sith power reclaimed through the enemy's wisdom. Would the cult's obsession with the past doom their future? The tyranny of Sidious's control. Darth Sidious, the puppet master of the Sith Eternal, was both their salvation and their curse. From his resurrection in a decaying clone body, he ruled Exegol with an iron grip, demanding absolute loyalty while withholding the full scope of his plans. The cultists saw him as the embodiment of the Sith's destiny, but Sidious viewed them as tools, disposable cogs in his grand machine. He shared only fragments of his knowledge, fearing that a fully empowered cultist might challenge his throne. This secrecy stifled the Sith Eternal's progress, as acolytes competed ruthlessly for his approval, hoarding discoveries rather than sharing them. The Citadel's halls echoed with whispers of betrayal as ambition poisoned their unity. Sidious's own limitations compounded the cult's struggles. While he wielded immense power, his knowledge of ancient Sith rituals was incomplete, a direct consequence of Gravid's destruction. He relied on the Sith Eternal to experiment with half-understood techniques such as binding Sith spirits to physical forms. One such attempt, led by a cultist named Sister Kael, sought to summon the spirit of Darth Bane. The ritual succeeded briefly, conjuring a specter that spoke in riddles before dissipating, leaving Kael comatose. Sidious's frustration grew. He demanded results, but his refusal to teach the cult his own secrets, such as the essence transfer he'd mastered, created a vicious cycle. The cult's failures fed his distrust, and his distrust ensured their failures. The Sith Eternals' reliance on technology further hindered their efforts. They built vast machines to amplify their rituals, drawing on Exegol's Dark Nexus, but these devices were crude compared to the Ancients' mastery of the Force. Their Star Destroyers, armed with planet-killing weapons, were a testament to their engineering, but they lacked the esoteric finesse of Naga Sado's alchemical fleets. Sidious's obsession with control blinded him to the cult's potential. Had he trained a true apprentice among them, they might have unlocked the ancient powers. Instead, their rituals produced only fleeting successes, like a force phantom that crumbled after a single command. As the resistance began to stir, the cult's time was running out. Could they break free from Sidious's shadow to reclaim the Sith's lost glory? The rise of the resistance and the cult's desperation. As the resistance gained strength, the Sith Eternals' isolation on Exegol became their downfall. The galaxy was no longer the Empire's playground. Heroes like Rey and Finn rallied worlds against the First Order, unaware of the cult pulling its strings. The Sith Eternal, cloistered in their citadel, grew frantic. Their rituals, meant to restore powers like dark healing or world terraforming, faltered under pressure. Acolytes whispered of a prophecy. Sidious's return would herald a new Sith empire, but only if the ancient powers were restored. Yet, each failed experiment, warped clones, unstable force phantoms, deepened their despair. The dark nexus of Exegol, once their greatest asset, began to consume them, driving acolytes to madness or betrayal. A faction within the cult, led by a rogue alchemist named Torv, sought to bypass Sidious's restrictions. Torv uncovered a fragment of a holocron attributed to Marka Ragnos, hinting at a ritual to bind multiple Sith spirits into a single vessel, a power that could have made Sidious invincible. Torv's experiments, conducted in secret, produced a grotesque hybrid, a creature infused with the essence of lesser Sith spirits, but it was uncontrollable, slaughtering its creators before collapsing. Torv's rebellion was swiftly crushed by Sidious's enforcers, but the damage was done. The cult's unity fractured further, with factions accusing each other of heresy. The loss of Torv's knowledge, like gravid centuries before, was a blow they could ill afford. The Resistance's growing strength forced the Sith Eternal to accelerate their plans. They poured resources into constructing the Final Order's fleet, hoping raw military might could compensate for their lack of ancient powers. But the cult's rituals remained their true goal. One last attempt to recreate Fold Space resulted in a cataclysmic explosion, destroying a wing of the Citadel and killing dozens of acolytes. The survivors, now numbering in the hundreds, clung to their faith in Sidious, believing his resurrection would unlock the secrets they'd failed to grasp. As Rey approached Exegol, guided by the Force, the cult's desperation reached its peak. The fall of Exegol and the Sith's last stand. The Battle of Exegol was the Sith Eternal's final hour. As Rey confronted Sidious in his throne room, the cultists chanted in the shadows, their rituals reaching a fever pitch. They believed their dark nexus would amplify Sidious's power, allowing him to wield the ancient abilities they'd failed to master. But the Force had other plans. Rey, bolstered by the spirits of past Jedi, turned Sidious's own power against him, destroying his cloned body and scattering his essence. The Citadel's runes flickered and died, and the cult's machines fell silent. The Resistance's fleet, aided by a galaxy united, obliterated the Final Order's armada, leaving Exegol a tomb. The Sith Eternal's failure was not just military, but philosophical. Their blind devotion to Sidious blinded them to their own potential. Had they shared knowledge openly, like the Jedi, they might have pieced together the fragments of ancient lore. Instead, their secrecy and infighting echoed Gravid's betrayal, dooming their efforts. The Dark Nexus, meant to empower them, became a trap, amplifying their fear and ambition until it consumed them. The few surviving acolytes fled into Exegol's depths, their dreams of restoring powers like essence transfer or force phantoms reduced to ashes. The holocrons they'd hoarded cracked under the battle's chaos, their secrets lost once more. In the aftermath, the galaxy breathed a sigh of relief, unaware of the cult's true ambitions. The Sith Eternal had come closer than any knew, to unlocking the Ancient's might. A single successful ritual could have reshaped worlds or bound Sith spirits to Sidious, making him unstoppable. But their reliance on a single master, their fractured unity, and the lingering curse of Gravid's destruction ensured their downfall. As Exegol's storms raged on, the Citadel became a monument to the Sith's greatest flaw. Their hunger for power always sowed the seeds of their destruction. Could another cult rise from these ashes, or was the Sith's dream truly dead? Closing thought: the Sith's eternal flaw. The tale of the Sith Eternal is a tragedy of ambition and loss, set against Exegol's desolate crags and pulsing dark nexus. Their failure to restore the ancient Sith powers, teleportation, spirit-binding, world-shaping sorcery, stems from the same flaw that doomed Darth Gravid: the Sith's inability to trust. Sidious's secrecy, the cult's infighting, and the shadow of Gravid's betrayal created a cycle of destruction that no ritual could break. The theme of self-inflicted ruin runs deep, a cautionary tale that even the mightiest can fall to their own hubris. Imagine if they'd succeeded. The galaxy would be a graveyard. Share your thoughts below. What other secrets lie buried in Exegol's ruins? Until next time, may the Force be with you.